Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The wind howled across the frozen wasteland, sweeping up snow and ice in swirling gusts that bit at Ethan's face. He pulled his fur-lined hood tighter around his head, the edges stiff and crusted with frost. Each breath he took came out in a puff of white, instantly freezing in the bitter cold that enveloped the land like a curse. Around him, the world was a vast, desolate expanse of white, broken only by the dark silhouettes of trees, their branches bowed under the weight of snow, and the jagged peaks of distant mountains, barely visible through the gray haze of perpetual winter. Ethan trudged through the snow, his boots crunching against the frozen ground. His bow was slung across his back, a quiver of arrows at his side, and a knife tucked into his belt. He was a hunter by trade, but in this land, hunting was more than just a job, it was survival. The game was scarce, driven deeper into the forests by the unyielding cold, and the few animals that remained were fierce, desperate for food. But Ethan was no stranger to hardship. He had been raised in this land of eternal winter, where every day was a battle against the elements. His mind, however, was not on the hunt today. It was on the frozen memories that plagued the people of his village, the memories that brought with them an unbearable cold. The curse had been a part of their lives for as long as anyone could remember. Whenever someone tried to recall the past, the memory would freeze in their minds, spreading an icy chill that could leave them bedridden for days, or worse. Ethan had seen it happen too many times, people shivering uncontrollably, their faces pale and lips blue, as if the cold had seeped into their very souls. It was said that the land itself was cursed, that the eternal winter was a manifestation of the people's frozen memories, a punishment for some forgotten sin. But no one knew for sure. The elders spoke of a time before the curse, when the land was green and fertile, when the sun shone warmly in the sky, and the people lived in harmony with nature. But those were just stories, and even the elders could not remember the truth. The curse had taken that from them too. Ethan's thoughts drifted back to his mother, the memory of her face clear in his mind, though the edges were tinged with frost, like a picture half buried in snow. She had been a strong woman, with a sharp mind and a gentle heart, always there to guide him, to teach him the ways of the hunt, to comfort him when the cold became too much to bear. But she had also been one of the first to fall victim to the curse. He remembered the day she tried to recall something from her past. What it was, he could no longer say. The memory had frozen in her mind, and with it came a chill that she could not escape. She had shivered for days, her skin turning paler and paler until she was as white as the snow that surrounded their village. And then she was gone, taken by the cold. That loss had left a void in Ethan's heart, one that no amount of time could fill. It was why he had never tried to remember too much, to dig too deeply into his past. The pain of losing his mother was enough, he did not want to lose himself as well. But the encounter with the mirror shard had changed everything. It had been a day like any other. Ethan had been out hunting, following the tracks of a deer through the snow when he stumbled upon it, a piece of an old mirror, half buried in the snow, its surface dull and scratched. Curious, he had picked it up, wiping away the frost with his gloved hand. As he did, a memory flashed in his mind, his mother, standing by the fire, her face lit by the warm glow, her eyes filled with love as she looked at him. But the memory froze almost as soon as it appeared, and with it came a cold so intense that Ethan had nearly collapsed. It was as if the mirror had awakened something within him, something that had been buried deep beneath the ice for too long. That was when he knew he had to find the source of the curse, to break it once and for all. He could not live the rest of his life haunted by frozen memories, nor could he stand by and watch as the people of his village succumbed to the cold, one by one. The village elder had told him of a place deep in the ice fields, a forgotten city where the curse had begun. It was a place of legend, a place where no one had dared to venture for fear of never returning. But Ethan was determined. He would go there, and he would find the answers he sought, no matter the cost. The journey was long and arduous, the cold growing more intense with each passing day. The sun, which never truly set in this land of eternal winter, hung low in the sky, casting a pale, ghostly light over the landscape. The nights were the hardest. The cold seeped into his bones, no matter how many layers of furs he wore, and the silence was so profound that it felt like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the stillness. Ethan pressed on, driven by a determination that bordered on obsession. He had to keep moving, had to keep going forward, even as the wind whipped around him, biting at his exposed skin. He thought of the village, of the people he had left behind, their faces etched in his memory. He thought of his mother, her face frozen in time, a memory he could never fully recall without the fear of succumbing to the cold. Days turned into weeks as Ethan pushed deeper into the ice fields. The terrain grew more treacherous, the snow deeper, the cold more biting. He crossed frozen rivers that threatened to break beneath his feet, climbed icy cliffs that loomed like jagged teeth against the sky, and braved blizzards that left him blind and disoriented. Yet, he pressed on, guided by the elder's cryptic verse and the memory of his mother. One night, as he huddled by a small fire, his back against a rocky outcrop for shelter, he dreamt of her again. This time, the memory was clearer, more vivid. She was singing, a soft lullaby that he had heard countless times as a child. Her voice was warm, a stark contrast to the cold that surrounded him. But as the song reached its final note, the memory froze, the sound of her voice replaced by the howling wind, the warmth of her presence replaced by a chill that seeped into his very soul. Ethan woke with a start, the fire reduced to embers, the cold more intense than ever. He knew then that he was close, that the source of the curse was near. The next day, he reached the forgotten city. It was a haunting sight, even more desolate and eerie than he had imagined. The city was vast, its buildings towering above him, their spires encased in ice, the streets buried under layers of snow. There was no sign of life, no sound except the crunch of his boots on the frozen ground and the distant moan of the wind as it swept through the empty streets. Ethan wandered through the city, searching for any clue, any sign that might lead him to the source of the curse. The buildings were grand, their architecture unlike anything he had ever seen, but they were crumbling, worn down by centuries of neglect and the relentless cold. The windows were dark, the doors frozen shut, the streets littered with debris half buried in the snow. It was in the heart of the city that he found the Grand Hall, a massive structure with a domed roof, its walls lined with tall, narrow windows that let in the pale light of the sun. The hall was empty, save for a massive frozen lake at its center, its surface smooth and unbroken, like a mirror reflecting the icy sky above. Ethan approached the lake, his breath catching in his throat as he saw the figure suspended in the ice, a woman, her face serene, her hand outstretched as if reaching for something. She was beautiful, her features delicate and refined, her hair flowing around her like a dark halo, frozen in place. She wore a gown of pure white, the fabric rippling as if caught in a breeze, though there was no movement in the air. He knew, without a doubt, that this woman was the key to the curse. The closer he got to her, the colder it became, until he could feel the frost creeping up his legs, his arms, his chest, as if the cold was trying to pull him into the ice with her. But he could not stop, could not turn back. He had come too far, endured too much, to give up now. As he stood at the edge of the lake, the elder's verse echoed in his mind, the warmth of truth hidden in the coldest heart. He had thought it a riddle, a clue to finding the source of the curse, but now he understood its true meaning. The curse was not an external force, not something that could be broken by a weapon or a spell. It was a manifestation of the people's own fear, their unwillingness to face the truth of their pasts. The frozen memories were a defense mechanism, a way to protect themselves from the pain of loss and regret. Ethan realized that to break the curse, he had to confront his own deepest memory, the moment his mother died. He had never allowed himself to fully remember that day, to face the pain of her loss. He had buried it deep within himself, hoping that the cold would numb the pain, but it had only made it worse that he knelt by the frozen lake, his hands trembling as he pressed them against the ice. The cold was unbearable, but he forced himself to focus on the memory, to let it come to the surface, no matter how much it hurt. He remembered the sound of her voice, the warmth of her embrace, the way she smiled at him, even in her final moments. He remembered the day she tried to recall something from her past, the way her face had contorted in pain as the memory froze in her mind, the way her body had shivered uncontrollably as the cold took hold of her. Tears welled up in his eyes as he allowed himself to feel the full weight of that memory, the pain, the sorrow, the loss. It was like a knife in his chest, sharp and unrelenting, but he did not pull away. He let the memory wash over him, let it consume him, until the ice beneath his hands began to crack. The sound was deafening, like the shattering of glass, as the ice split open, spreading out in jagged lines across the surface of the lake. The figure in the ice began to move, her eyes fluttering open, her hand reaching out to him. Ethan watched in awe as the woman emerged from the ice, her body slowly thawing, the frost melting away to reveal her true form. She was not just a woman, she was a symbol, a representation of all the frozen memories, all the pain and sorrow that had been locked away for so long. As she stepped out of the ice, the curse began to lift. The air grew warmer, the snow began to melt, and the sun, hidden behind the clouds for centuries, finally broke through, casting its golden light over the city. Ethan fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the warmth that spread through him, melting the ice that had encased his heart for so long. The woman smiled at him, her eyes filled with gratitude, before she dissolved into a mist of light, rising up into the sky, taking the curse with her. The city, once frozen and desolate, began to come to life. The buildings thawed, their walls shedding the layers of ice that had encased them, the streets cleared of snow, revealing cobblestones that gleamed in the sunlight. The air was filled with the sound of birdsong, a sound that had not been heard in this land for as long as anyone could remember. Ethan rose to his feet, feeling lighter than he had in years. The pain of his mother's loss was still there, but it was no longer a burden. He had faced it, embraced it, and in doing so, he had freed himself from the curse. That he made his way back to the village, the journey taking him half the time it had before, as the snow melted and the land began to thaw. When he arrived, the villagers were waiting for him, their faces filled with wonder and disbelief as they beheld the change in the land. The eternal winter was over, the curse broken, and for the first time in generations, they could remember their pasts without fear. Ethan told them of his journey, of the frozen city and the woman in the ice, of the truth he had discovered. The villagers listened in awe, their eyes wide with amazement, and when he was done, they thanked him, not just for breaking the curse, but for giving them back their memories, their lives. The village elder, who had been the one to guide him on his journey, came to him afterward. She looked at him with pride in her eyes, her wrinkled face creasing into a smile. "You have done what no one else could, Ethan," she said. "You have freed us from the past, from the fear that held us captive for so long. You have given us a new beginning." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with a sense of accomplishment. But he knew that the journey was not over. The land had begun to thaw, but it would take time for the scars of the curse to heal. The people would have to learn to live without the fear of frozen memories, to embrace the warmth of the sun and the truth of their pasts. As the days passed, the village began to transform. The snow receded, revealing the rich, fertile soil beneath. The people began to plant crops, to rebuild their homes, to reclaim the land that had been lost to the ice for so long. The warmth of the sun brought new life to the village, and with it came a sense of hope, a belief that the future could be brighter than the past. Ethan stood on a hill overlooking the village, watching as the people worked together, their laughter and chatter filling the air. The once silent, frozen land was now alive with activity, with joy, with the promise of a better tomorrow. He knew that his mother would have been proud of him, that she would have understood the journey he had undertaken, the truth he had uncovered. He had faced his deepest fears, confronted the pain of his past, and in doing so, he had found the warmth of truth hidden in the coldest heart. The wind still blew across the land, but it was no longer the biting, bitter cold that had once plagued it. It was a gentle breeze, carrying with it the scent of earth and life, a reminder that even in the coldest of places, warmth could be found, if only one had the courage to seek it out. And so, the story of the frozen memories came to an end, not with the silence of ice, but with the laughter of a people reborn, a land renewed, and a hunter who had discovered that the greatest journey was not one of distance, but of the heart.